the Heilige Bashefer is washing the floors of Yerushalayim Ir HaKodesh for your arrival, Rabbi Isai. The floors have been being washed for the last week. The Heilige Bashefer is washing every part of Yerushalayim so that when the Olam comes, crystal clean, Bezes Hashem. You see how much it means, the Archei Kala? Let's see, Rabbi Isai.
I'm sorry what the Rav means. Rav means it's pouring. That's what it means.
Oh, it's not pouring. The Heilige Bashefer is washing the floors of Yerushalayim. Pouring is, no, understatement.
Okay.
It's going to be crystal clean for your arrival. Bez Hashem.
It's still raining. I assume that's still pouring. Okay. Baruch Hashem. Gishmei bracha.
Gishmei bracha. Mamash bracha. So, before I begin, I just want to mention that this wrap, which I think we spoke about, if I'm not mistaken, I don't remember if it was last time or 2 times ago, if I'm not mistaken. So I actually had one recently. And it's probably very important to eat one of these guys before you give a shir about them. Now, I do know, al tam bal reach ein ma litvakeach, no argument about taste. And I do understand that some people could like things that I don't particularly like. But I had it by itself, and it really is not the tastiest thing. I hope I'm not offending anybody right now, including some Mexican tortilla macher. But it really doesn't taste so good. It's very interesting. The nafkamina of that statement is that the Mishnah Berurah in our Siman actually has a whole discussion about certain types of foods that the person is eating with a cracker. And the Mishnah Berurah discusses these crackers over here in our Siman, Kuf Samches, you've cut in, where was it, Memhei, Memvav. Mishnah Berurah discusses these crackers, and he discusses if they are crackers that have no taste, and that you're only eating them just that your hands shouldn't get dirty. And he says that they would become a tuffle. They would become a tuffle, kimoi, that we find that even bread can become a tuffle. If there's a dag maliach, if there's some type of a salty fish, even a dag can become tuffle, even a bread can become tuffle. So too over here, it's a tuffle. It's just being eaten for one purpose, which is to down the fish or down that food which doesn't go down well. The question is, by a wrap, it's something interesting. It's something in the middle. I would say like this. There's sometimes you have a cracker that the cracker itself has a good taste and you can eat the cracker by itself. There's the other extreme that you have a cracker which has no taste, which today you don't find so much. It has no taste at all, and you are eating it solely in order to not get your hands dirty. I would say a wrap is something in between. It's something that when you eat it by itself, it really doesn't have a good taste. When you put it together with food, it tastes good together with the food. I myself would have thought that remains, again, hamoitzi, mezainis, whatever you want to say. But I wonder if somebody could come along and say, no, something that you can't eat by itself is a tuffle to the food. I don't believe that as far as true, but I just wanted to throw it past the oilam. That maybe if you'll hear something, because it bothers me a little bit is that I was told that some hold it's a mezainis because it doesn't have the chshivas because you can't eat it by itself. So then if you really believe in that svara, so then it's no bracha at all. Elamai, you don't believe in that svara because, like we're explaining right now, the Maisa, when you eat it together with other food, it does have a good taste. So I do firmly believe that, and therefore what we said the other day stays the same. But I did feel the need to. Sorry,
it's soid.
What do you mean it's soid?
You get full from it. It's
therefore what?
So it's flour from the wrap.
That's not the kurveya. By you're saying therefore it shouldn't be bottle.
Yeah. The
crackers the Mishnah Berurah was talking about, person could be eating them until he's soyed. But over there, the Mishnah Berurah says that the person, they had a dreadful taste, and he was just doing it it's totally in your kavanah. If you're doing it to not get your hands dirty. Let's say that this person, I don't know, you could done. Let's say somebody mamish hates tortillas. He just hates them, and he's putting in schnitzel, and he's putting in everything, and he's doing it for one purpose, just not to get his hands dirty. That's a first Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says, if you're doing it just not to get your hands dirty, I got soyed, so then you wouldn't make a bracha.
But you don't need a sandwich to do it.
Halafa is mamish not like that. Halafa, everybody can eat halafa by itself. In other words, the difference is very simple. At the end of the meal, after I finished my meal, there was a little bit of this tortilla left. When I tried to eat it, it's a no-go. You can't eat this thing by itself. At least I can't. I'm not saying if that's true by everyone. Halafa is no shaykhs. The person at the end of a shawarma, he has a little bit of halafa left. Of course, he eats it by itself. So therefore, that would be, but the potential svara, and the svara is of ikr v'tafel. That's something that you never eat by itself. You get done. I got to think it's not true. I think since you eat it together with something else, and you want it when you're eating it together with something else, as opposed to what the Mishabru was talking about, was you were doing it not to eat with the other thing. You were doing it just to be a spoon. Didn't want to get your hands dirty. So now we don't have a raya to cup it out. But maybe somebody bigger will come along and say, not like I'm saying. I'm just saying it's not exactly what I thought it was, but I don't think the halacha changes.
I mean, a yeshiva bacher will eat the end of a wrap no matter what's there. He'll just eat it up. I mean,
Shem Shemayim, Rabbi Gottesman. I'm not sure if that's a raya because, it's there and, it's mamish bal tashchis if not. But I don't know. I don't know. I got it at the table by the Kallus and by all my bacher, my astivs, and everyone agreed that a wrap by itself it really doesn't taste good. The mamish doesn't taste good. The oilam could try it tonight. But Akopanim, that's number one.
one thing that the oilam's confused about, the fact that they keep on sticking the May Paris in and they put it on the wrapper and all that. Does that have any type?
That'll be the same exact shaila as the Mezainis roll shaila, which in Hashem, when we learn the sugya, we're going to see that it's kimat by the Mishabru, it's for sure no go. So it'll be the same Mezainis roll shaila. If you hold Mezainis rolls or Mezainis, then it's the same shaila. If you hold the Mezainis rolls are not a Mezainis, which the Mishabru holds is a mistake, so then it's a mighty. That won't help. That's the biggest raya, the biggest raya that the May Paris that they're adding are not helping klal is that you still can't eat these things when they're by themselves. That's the biggest raya that the May Paris is a no-go. It's not doing anything. This number one. Now, but I said the sugya of today, Mitzvah Hashem, is the sugya of sheer kfiyas suda. How much mezainis of Pasuk Bekisnin do I need to eat in order to bench, to watch, to make a moitzi, etc.? How much is it that I'm getting into a shaila? How much is it that it's no shaila and yuvada yes have to bench? Or how much is it no shaila and yuvada don't have to bench? And this is really, in essence, this is the biggest shaila in Gans Kol HaTorah in Gans Halacha. It's the most negay shaila of every person, every single day in the Gans Welt. Men, women, children, the biggest shaila in the world. All the time of the day, lunch, supper, breakfast. The shaila everywhere. It's a shaila on Shabbat, shaila everywhere. This is the major shaila. What is the amount that if a person eats, we consider it already to be a meal, and therefore your bracha is no longer a mezainis, your bracha is a maitzi. And at what point do we say it's enough, sir? You have to make a birchas hamazon. And the starting point, really, the Beis Yosef brings in Augur, and the Augur seems to tell us. In other words, we do know, and that's something that we understand, that when we're discussing the amount of mezainis, we know it's not totally in us.
Put up the Beis Yosef.
We know that that's a machlekes rishonim, and it's totally in what is considered by we say but l'daita to you, but now we want to know. So how much is it that it's considered enough mezainis? That's not up to me. But how much is it that it's enough mezainis that I ate that it's going to be considered a kviyas suda? And afterward, we'll see the Mishabur then brings a Mogen Avram, which brings down two new chumras, we'll call them, but two new factors that one must factor in when he's eating Pasuk Bekisnin. The Mogen Avram is going to bring down, Shabur brings it, that also, even if we'll say the amount that we're going to discuss, what exactly is the amount for Kviyas Suda, that's when you're eating the mezainis by itself. Then the Mogen Avram is going to be mechanish to us that there comes a point where I'm eating a certain amount as a bread supplement. And if you're eating it instead of the bread, you're eating pretzels, let's say it's instead of the bread, you're eating it with other foods. So you're having crackers and tuna, crackers and egg salad and all these things. Then, says the Mogen Avram, unbelievable chiddush, he says, if you're eating the Pasuk Bekisnin with other foods, that's also a kfiyas. That amount of mezainis that you eat together with other foods, if it's the amount of bread that you would have in its place, in other words, let's say in a meal I'd have 3 pieces of bread, and you have an amount of crackers, which is 3 pieces of bread worth of crackers, I don't know, let's say 20 crackers, 15 crackers, whatever the numbers are, we'll see soon. But Al Kapanim, says the Mogen Avram, once you have that amount with the egg salad, with the tuna, with whatever you're having, then that's also called a kviyas suda. So now we really need to know. We need to know how much is the mezainis by itself. Then we need to know how much is the mezainis when I eat it together with the other food. And then the Mogen Avram, like a greisa chumrah, I'll call it a bigger chumrah, that not only that, What if I have the amount of mezainis that people use as a bread supplement? In other words, let's say we'll say that a person has 3 pieces of bread in a meal, something like that. So now we established if you have 3 pieces of bread worth of crackers with the other stuff, that's also Kviya Suda. Now, what if I have just that, the 3 pieces of bread worth of crackers by itself, but it fills me up? A third case, that itself filled me up. Then we look subjectively. And the Magen Avraham says, and then you'd have to bench and watch. Unbelievable chumras. We have to figure out what this is. So this is basically the sugi of the day. We'll go one by one. It comes out an amazing thing. It'll come out. It passed this. Let's say, I think the amount of bread, even before we begin, just to see where we're headed, it'll come out that the amount of bread I think a normal person has with his meal today is maybe 2 pieces, 3 pieces, something like that. It can make it 4 pieces, whatever you want. And that's the amount that if he would have together with egg salad, that amount of crackers, pretzels, he'd have together with tuna, this, that, whatever, that would be called the Kviya Suda according to the Magen Avraham. And now, the doozy. Now, let's say the guy, he just needs a little Danish in the afternoon to fill him up. He's a little bit hungry. He needs a little snack in the afternoon. He has a Danish. How big is a Danish? A Danish is about the size of 3 pieces of bread, maybe even 4 pieces of bread. He eats that Danish and he gets full. According to what you just heard, he has to wash and bench. It's a pachap chadim. Is anybody in the world that ever did that? Wash and bench on maybe the Magen Avraham. Magen Avraham was from Kallus. Maybe the Kalluses, that's what they do. We have to find this out, the Mitzvah Shem. About Kapanim, this is the big sugya. And over here, the Mishbura brings down, and it's based, we'll see, it's based on the Ugar, based on what is the amount of the Kviya Suda? What's the amount? So, I'll go a little bit out of order. The Mishbura over here, and Sivkot Chav Dalet, brings down 2 shitas. The first shita that the Mishbura brings over here, he brings down Gimel Dalet Beitzim. The core of this is really in the Toises Yom Kippurim, and he wrote the Kappas Tamarim. The HaRav brings this in Sivkot in Yud Zayin, and the Ben Ish Chai in Shana Aleph Parshas Pinchas in Ois Yutes, he brings down the amount is Gimel Dalet Beitzim. Where does Gimel Dalet Beitzim come from? The Gemara in Eruvin. The Gemara in Eruvin over there is discussing how much a person has to be putting down for the Erev Tchumim over there in the Gemara Pei Aleph Beis Gimel Ein Sham. The Gemara discusses how much a person has to put down. He has to put down the amount of a Suda, 2 Sudas. So what comes out from the Maskanas Gemara over there is how much is considered a Suda. So it's a machlekes shitas. Does he have to put down Dalet Beitzim, 8 Beitzim, or does he have to put down Gimel Beitzim? So that's what Mishabur over here brings, and that's what the Ben Ish Chai says over here, is that the amount of a Suda is Gimel Dalet Beitzim. If that's the case, it's going to be a very, very difficult road, Rabbi Yisai. How much Baruch is Gimel Dalet Beitzim? In the middle slice of bread, Rabbi Yisai, in the loaf of bread, the middle slice is way more than a beitza. And we think a beitza because of its oval shape. It's very misleading. The beitza really is a lot smaller than she looks. And it's if the middle slice of bread is bevadai a beitza, it's probably way more than a beitza. Don't forget also there's big machlekes in what's called a beitza. So now, but let's say an egg is an egg. Let's say no. So now you take an egg, or for example, you take a 7-ounce cup. A revius is about 3.5 ounces. So a revius is about a beitza. Right? So go and fill up 2 plastic cups worth of cake or 2 plastic cups worth of crackers, and that's already gimel dal beitza. My boy said, I'm not discussing now the second and third chumras of when you're having the crackers and the cake as a bread supplement. I'm discussing right now how much cake, pretzels, baked mezainis products. If you have, now you're done. It's a moitzi, it's a wonderful thing. It's a moitzi, it's berachas hamazon. The HaRav, the Ben Ish Chai, and the Mishabur in the first sheet over here bring down the amount is gimel dalet beitzim ha'oichel בכיסנין. He says shir shloish beitzim. The Ben Ish Chai says he's being machmer gimel beitzim. The Ben Ish Chai is machmer on gimel beitzim. What's the pshat? Because that's the amount that we found by a suda. We find the makor in shas that's the amount of a suda. According to this, how big is the pizza? I guess it's like asking, in Shidduch, how tall is the bacher? But how big is a pizza? The average pizza in New York. I think it's, if you look in, there's a picture book on HBrachos, Rabbi Badner. If you look over there, your average pizza, Rabbi Yisai, is already basically gimel dalet beitzim, 7-8 kazesim. So that's it. One pizza, even if you hold that pizza is mezainis. I'm not getting involved in that machlekes now, but let's say you all know that there's a tzad gadol out there that pizza is mezainis because the cheese, the sauce, it doesn't make a difference. That's called memula. So fine, we'll look at a pizza and we'll say it's memula. We'll learn the actual machlekes a different time. But let's say pizza is like a ragalach, and therefore one slice of pizza has already in her 7 to 8 kizesim or something like that. According to this, if you're having one slice of pizza, even if you're somebody who says, I'm Mekel, I hold pizza's mezainis. I have one bite, it's a mezainis. Okay, but now you got to get involved in this shaila. Gimel dal beit, if you're a good Svardish Yid, the Ben Ish Chai Paskins, and so Paskins the Kafachayim and the Or Tzion, in Cheli Beis, Perakid Beis, Ois Beis. So if you hear from a Svardi that on pizza, he doesn't wash, you got to ask him how little he's eating. Because the Ben Ish Chai, the Or Tzion, all of them, they consider a pizza, l'chayra, a pizza is gimel dal beitzim. If it's gimel dal beitzim, then l'chayra, you have to watch and you have to bench. As I state in the Kafachayim. Now, LiMayseh, the Graz, the Balatanya, and this is really based on the Auger, the Balatanya and Sifches argues on this. And the Balatanya says, which we'll learn up the sheet of the Balatanya soon, but the Balatanya says there's no raya from Erev. Says the Graz, Erev is over there talking about the shear of an ani. What's the smallest amount? So that's what the Gemara is trying to bring out over there. That the shear of the smallest amount of Suda. That it has a shame of a Suda. Because Klap Erev Tchumim, when they were geyser, that the person has to put down a Suda, they were geyser even for an ani, and they didn't want to be machalik. So they said the smallest amount of a Suda is Gimel Beitzim. But Mashain Kain, when it comes to a Ganta Suda, a real Suda, a normal healthy Suda, so then it's going to be much more than that. That's not the normal amount. What is the normal amount? So he goes on to say, like we're going to see in a moment, that's the amount of a person. We'll see, it's considered, he gives an outscale amount. We'll talk about it. But he says there's no raya from Erevin. Before we go into the next shita, in this shita itself, right, the Mishabura paskins that lichatchila, says the Mishabura, you have to be chayshish for this shita. Mishabura brings down over here. He says that, and it's not, it's not small. People. The Chatchila Toiv Lachash for the Machmirim. The Mishabura is only Machmir on the Daled Beitzim if you're a Medayik. He wasn't worried about the Gimel, since the whole thing is a Machlekes in the first place. So Mishabura is Machmir on the Daled Beitzim. Says Mishabura, the Chatchila, you're supposed to be Machmir. That means a Lichatchila Dik a Yid. If you hear a Yid and he tells you, on pizza, I make a mezainis. One slice of mezainis, 2 slices. I might see some people say this like this. There's a difference in this week's parsha. If you hear him say that, you know what he just said? He just says, I don't hold lechatchila. Because he's either telling you one or 2 things. He's either telling you, I'm not a Sephardi, because for sure you can't be a Sephardi. A Sephardi, one slice of pizza is already gimel dal beitzim. Or he's telling you, I'm an Ashkenazi and I don't do things lechatchila, because Mishabura already told you lechatchila that you're supposed to be chayshish. That's number 1. And this Rabbi Yisai, why is the Mishabura chayshish? Because the sheet is over here. This is Rabbi Yisai. Rabbi Kiva Eger brings this. The Mogen Avram Remes is mashma like this. The Kapis Tamarim, I told you, the Kafachayim, the Birkei Yosef, they all seem to bring this. But there's a line over here in the Mishabura that I think a lot of people miss. The next words in the Mishabura, there's a few drops of ink over here that the Mishabura adds. And I think, till now a person can come along and say, look, I'm not such a lichatchila dekiyid. Is there a sheet out there that holds not like that? I'm okay with it. Come to Mishabura over here, and he says, that's toiv to be chayshish for the das machmirim. Says the Mishabura, but kol shekain. This is not just toiv. This is not just toiv. Here he's about to say, bevada yesh lachish. When is it bevada yesh lachish? It's not just toiv. Says the Mishabura, if, let's say, we know there's a tremendous machlekes, which thing is called pasa בכיסנין, we know that in Siv Zayin, we're going to see 3 different shitas. Which one is pasa בכיסנין? Is it Mimbula? Is it Nilaish? Is it Parich? Says Mishabura, we always make a mezainis because we have a suffix, but it's still a suffix nachalz. Says the Mishabura, now if you put these 2 sfeikis together, you have pretzels. Pretzels is definitely a suffix pasa b'kisnin, and we make a mezainis. But he says, yeah, but there's also tzadat hamaisi. And there are shitas that hold on gimel dal beitzim. That's already called the kviyas suda. Says Mishabura, then vada yesh lachish. Kloimar, if you have all 3 t'nayim, then it's lechatchila, you should be chayshish and not have more than gimel dal beitzim. It doesn't mean you should wash and bench, because there's another sheet that we'll see in a moment. But if you're having gimel dal beitzim of, let's say, something that's all 3 t'nayim, let's say apple strudel is all 3 t'nayim. No, so if you're having all 3 t'nayim, so then lichatchila you should be chayshish, but the person will say, I'm not lichatchila. But let's say you have a food which is not Vadai pasa בכיסנין, it's one of the suffix pasa בכיסnins of Siv Zayin, which is basically a lot of the things that we deal with, like pretzels, like crackers, like a lot of the foods we deal with, pretzels and crackers. So he has crackers, and the person wants to take a cracker, and he says, okay, I'm going to have, a bunch of crackers and this, that. So then, says the Mishnah, there, vadai yesh lachish, no games. Then for sure you must be chayshish and not have more than gimel daled beitzim. Nafkamina pizza. Well, what's the most that pizza could be? So pizza is it's at least a suffix pass. Everyone agrees that pizza is at least a suffix pass. It's mamula, let's say, and we're going to see it sad in Sifit Zayin that pizza is almost a vadai pass.
Why crackers? Crackers are the kiddush. Why don't you have to wash before crackers are the kiddush? Especially if you're eating the other
No,
stuff.
that we didn't get there yet though, because we're talking right now when the mezainis is by itself. I'm going to leave the Magen Avraham for after, otherwise it'll get confusing. I'm talking about when you're eating the amount of mezainis by itself. So now let's say a person comes along and says, on pizza, I'm not better than Ramosha. We'll see if Ramosha what he did say, but I'm not better than Ramosha. And Ramosha, there was a shmu in the world, one pizza is mezainis. I call it the kitzah shulchan aruch. The kitzah shulchan aruch on pizza says you make a mezainis. So he says, look, I'm not better than the kitzah shulchan aruch. Then on one slice of pizza, I make a mezainis. But wait a minute, Rabid, on one slice of pizza, if you want to have one bite of pizza, 10 bites of pizza here, but a whole slice, that's gimel daled beitzim. On that, the Mishnah Berurah, people miss this line. The Mishnah Berurah over here does not say lichatchila don't have gimel daled beitzim of pasav bekisnin. He only said that when it's vadai pasav bekisnin. But if it's something that there's a tzad that it's hamoitzi, on that the Mishnah Berurah says vadai yesh lachish. So Melo, if someone comes along and says to you, pizza, now I make a mezainis on one slice. So you know what he just told you? I don't listen to the vadai yesh lachish of the Mishnah Berurah. Nah, I don't listen to the lichatchila of the Mishnah Berurah. I don't listen to the vadai yesh lachish of the Mishnah Berurah. So this l'chayra is what comes out. This is what comes out. I must be Moisef. I want to be Moisef. One Nakuda. Okay, before that Nakuda. Is that crystal clear, by say? Now, what would you do? You certainly wouldn't just take this. And Nafkamina will be that Danish that we spoke about. If the Danish is, I don't know, a Danish is all three tonight, maybe Danish are all three tonight. Parach, Mamula, Nilash. So okay, so then it's toiv lichatchila that he shouldn't have the Danish if it's going to be the size of gimel daled beitzim, which is not so big. Okay, so now what should he do? He can't wash and bench on this Danish because it's still a suffix. We'll see. There's a whole different shita. But upon him, what he should do, mistama is he should pater it with a piece of bread. And he should have a kazayis of bread. I don't know if you have to have a kabeya bread, even though we usually wash the til sidayim with a bracha only on a kabeya. But Ramesha has a tshuva where he says that if there's no choice, you can wash the til sidayim on a kazayis. And over here, there's a tzad gadol that the food he's eating, let's say a pizza, is anyways a mitzi. So no, we can have one kazayis of bread to pater up the pizza. But this Rabbi say is before we begin the pashtus of Mishnah Berurah, that you have to be chayshish lechatchila for gimel daled beitzim if it has the tnai all the time. If it's a suffix, amaitzi, so then you vade have to be chayshish for the first shita, and as far as she is, bevade has to be chayshish. That is the shita number one. Ad kedei kach, my understanding from the Kaf HaChaim is that he doesn't know what you have to pater. The Kaf HaChaim paskins like this, and that's a Sfardi. That's why it's a big deal. The Sfardim usually have suffix brachas. He seems to say we paskin and he says that it sounds like from the Kaf HaChaim even maybe even gimel beitzim, and it sounds like from the Kaf HaChaim that's it. You don't have to try to pater yourself. But we LiMayseh for sure are not going to be able to say that because Mishnah Berurah's Ikar Shita will be the second Shita. But upon him, certainly the Chayra, he does have to avoid the Shaila. Now, by say the Chayra, but what do you do? Let's say, let's start like this. Because it comes out a very interesting thing. I want to just mention something I want to think about. It's not related to what we're talking about in the specific Nakuda, but once we're talking about pizza, it's something to think about. I know in the Welt, they'd say one pizza mezainis and two pizzas amaitzi. We'll see about that in a moment. But this comes out a very interesting thing. We spoke last time that women, children, they're not b'fnei atzmai and they eat less. So it comes out that they're their own min. They're their own min. The min of ladies is that you have to find out. If ladies get filled up with one pizza and children get filled up with one pizza, It'll just come out a very interesting phenomenon. It'll come out that when the whole family is sitting around the table, the father's going to have one slice of pizza and he's going to make a mezainis. Let's say he won't be chayshish for the things we spoke about just now. So he'll go with the other shita. He's going to make a mezainis, and his children, his 7-year-old gets filled up with one slice, and his wife gets filled up with one slice. They're going to have to make a moitzi. It's damn interesting. They're an ambif neyatzmai. I just was thinking, it's an interesting thing. How do you mechanech children? Another, the kid, when he's going to get older on pizza, he's going to make a moitzi and berchas hamazon on one. He's going to make mezainis on one slice if you go with that shita. But when he's younger, so then he gets filled up with a small amount. So how do you mechanech him? You mechanech him on what he's going to do when he's older, or do you mechanech him on the mitzias of right now? This is totally in a very big machlekes in the Dina Machinach, or Moshe has a truth about it. Something to think about. That's an aside. Let's go back to our sugya. Now, come to Mishabura, and he brings a second shita. This is the shita of the Goin. This is the shita of the Chaye Odom. And they bring down over here that Kemat was explicit in the auger, that they bring down that the amount is not Dalet Beitzim, like we explained, that the amount is not, that's for the poorest person, like we explained before. And really the shear is the Lashon of Mishabura. He says, I read you the Gra, I actually have it right here. Actually, here the Chasam Sofer, the Shevet Levi, and Chelik Zayin Simcha Fei brings Farmuva Maran Chasam Sofer Loi Chashash the Shita Zalad Beitzim. It wasn't Chashash B'Zalad Beitzim, rather the Shita of the Gra. They bring in the Nishmas Adam. He brings down Shemanti from the Gra. The Gra was his mechutin. I heard from the Pek Kodesh of the Gra. Shaloi Nir Loi Elik Kamosh Nichtay B'Simin Dalad Shusudas Erev Etzarayim. Over here it says that it's the amount of the Sudas Erev Etzarayim, the amount of a meal, of the morning meal or the afternoon meal, the night meal, etc. Now, how much is that? How much is that? How much is the amount of the regular Suda, not this poorest Suda? So it's very interesting. Truth is, I should mention one thing before we go into the Shita. Maisa, the poor guy with the Danish. I mean, the poor guy with the Danish, it's already Gimel Dal Beitzim. He's going into second Seder. He needs a Danish, his wife made him one meal and he needs a little bit more. And he's going into second Seder and he needs to have a Danish or breakfast in the morning. He wants to have a Danish, whatever, something just to fill him up in the middle of Seder. He's in the middle of work. He wants to have a Danish. So you can tell this guy, what should I tell you? Lechatchila, he wants to be Lechatchila Dikayid. So he can't even have a Danish, but he's hungry. So interesting, two things to think about over here. One thing is that maybe I keep saying it's Gimel Dal Beitzim, but that's because when you see the Danish, she's all puffed up. Now it's true that when you're dining on shirim of matzah and things like that, and kesayis in general, then we take into account the air, and we say that that's also, we go by after the volume, right? But that all might be when you're dining on the chashivas of a mitzvah, of kesayis, of all the different sugyas, matzah, whatnot. Here, we're trying to figure out, is it going to fill the person up? Well, we're trying to figure out, maybe you would be allowed to push it down and not machshiv in the air holes. I saw that the Chazon Ish in Chav Vav Tes seems to be clearing this. And another clear that the Chazon Ish has is that what do we take into account when we're dining on the Gimel Dal Beitzim? Over there, the Chazon Ish is mashma that he has he's mistapik. Maybe we only take into account the flour and not all the other stuff, the eggs, the chocolate, etc., etc. And l'chayra, maybe because we're going to see there's another shita anyways, that would be something you could factor in. If that's true, everybody say so. Pretzels and crackers, it's not much change because the flour and the water, that's all it is. But when you're dealing with something like a Danish, there's a lot of eggs in there and sugar in there and there's a lot of chocolate in there and whatever. So now the whole Danish changed. First of all, I could push it down, number one. And number two is all I have to cheshbon in is the gimel dalid, and we'll say dalid beitzim of flour. Now, but say dalid beitzim of flour. Let's say you have those like a chocolate cake, a sponge cake. Dalid beitzim of flour is a ganze sponge cake. So therefore, he still would be within the lichatchila if he's having a huge piece of sponge cake or a fudge brownie, and he's still not necessarily in the suffix of this toiv lechatchila to be lachash. That's the first shita, Rabbi. Crystal clear? Now, Mishabura over here brings down a second shita. Like I said, this is the shita of the Vilna Gaon. Excuse me. This is the shita of the Vilna Gaon. And this is the sheet of the Gra, this is the sheet of the Chai Adam.
Right?
Yeah, Mishabura Kav Daled? Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Page 177 for Island.
And HBrachos LiMayseh in Chelik Daled, I think, if I'm not mistaken. I think he also brings this Gra. Just one moment. No, sorry, that's something else. The going the Chayyodim and the Graz, they bring down that the shear is not like we said. The shear is the amount of how much he's kaveya through this erev habayker. Now, how much is that? Come the Aruch HaShulchan and Sifta Zayin, and says the Aruch HaShulchan, he says, how much is it? So he says, look, it was in last week's parsha. It's very simple. The Graz is about to say the same thing as the Aruch HaShulchan, but the Aruch HaShulchan explains it. Says the Aruch HaShulchan, it's in last week's parsha, how much mon fell to every person, 2 sudas worth of mon. How much is that? An oimer. How much is an oimer? 43 eggs. No, 43 and a half. How much oibazai is 1 suda? Zog the Aruch HaShulchan, very simple, 21 eggs. Very simple, chatzi oimer. And that's what the Graz says. Kashir oimer legogoyos, the base sudas. Basically 21 eggs. As a state in the Aruch HaShulchan. Now, Maisa, how much is 21 eggs? The Metzias, that's a very big suda, I say. That's like a loaf of bread. Who's eating I don't know, maybe like a 7-course meal. I mean, I don't know, maybe I don't know what's going on in America today, but maybe a 7-course meal with everything. That's but Derek Klal, if you go with the Aruch HaShulchan and you go with the Baal Tanya, so then you're nowhere near the Shiloh. You're gonna have to eat tons and tons and tons and tons and tons of cake and whatnot, 7-course meal. But kumt HBrachos in Chelik Gimel, excuse me, in Chelik Gimel and Simon Beis, he says that it's not so mistaber. It's not mistaber like the Aruch HaShulchan. He says, who eats like that? No one eats like that. And even though the Gemara says over there that a person that eats like this, he's a bari, a mavayrach, right? But he said it's not. Gemara is maybe talking a Suda Shuva or something, maybe a Chassid meal, I don't know, a Shevrach, something special, maybe a Shabbos meal. But your average meal is not that. Says Ramosha, so then how much is it? Ramosha, Kedarkai, he says there's no clear amount. So Ramosha, and I'll read you the Lashon, Ramosha says that the amount is each person, each Medina, some people little, some people a lot, and therefore in each place you have to don what's the normal sized meal. Mishabura, in my opinion, is really also like that, because the Mishabura over here, he sort of doesn't tell you an amount. And the Mishabura had over here the Graz open on the table. He brings down Gimel Adal Beitz, and then he brings down that the Graz argues, and he doesn't bring down with the Graz at Suga Lake. The Graz adds it in parentheses. When the Graz adds something in parentheses, it means he's mesupik about it. But anyways, the Mishabura had the Graz open on the table and doesn't bring it down. What does he bring down? He says the other shitas argue and say that the amount is what's considered a normal meal. Because of Achreinim, excuse me. Aval, by the way, Rabbi say should know a big site in Mishabura. Aval in the Mishabura is a psak. When the Mishabura says something and then it says Aval, right? That's a psak in the Mishabura. This is what I was makabel from Rav Yashiv and from Rav Sheinberg Tzadikim Levracha. Both of them said the same thing.
Show the Aval with a red line. Aval kama Achreinim.
Aval's right by Shartzi and Sivkot and Yutes. So here the Mishabura is saying Aval kama Achreinim. Hold that no, you can only make a moitzi at what point? When you have a sheer erev habayker. Now again, it's gevaldik and meduik and Mishabura that he doesn't say an amount. What's the answer? The answer is whatever's the normal amount that people have, the size of a meal, that size is the amount. Now, how much is that? Does anybody know? What's the average size meal? And we'll talk in a minute about breakfast. Breakfast is a different story maybe. But what's the average size dinner that a person has? So I went around, I talked to various institutions that I'm connected to, It seems to be that from them, I'd say the average size meal is about half the size of the Aruch HaShulchan, about 12 beitzim. 12 beitzim. And then, according to this, it'll come out that you're going to be allowed to have 12 beitzim worth of cake, crackers, pretzels, etc., until you get into the shaila. So again, it sounds like from the Shmuel Lechatchila, 4 beitzim. Maybe we could apply the kula of the Chazon Ish, legabe pressing and legabe only adding the flour. At what point are we going to say that you could wash and bench? Not before 12 beitzim. Once you get to 12 beitzim, then the Mishnah Berurah holds you can wash and bench. Okay. Now, the Maisa, what bothered me is my Girsa D'Yankasa. When I grew up in the old country, they used to say 1 slice mezainis, 2 slices amaitzi. Now, before I go weiter, I see there's many participants. Does everybody agree with me that that's what we heard growing up? I'm a day younger than some of you. I'm a day older than some of you. I think that was the Girsa D'Yankasa and the Haim. 1 slice mezainis, 2 slices amaitzi. That's what we grew up with. Today, could be what you're hearing, it don't make sense. It doesn't stem. First of all, 1 slice mezainis, it's against the Mishnah Berurah. Because the Mishnah Berurah tells you that lichatchila shouldn't do it. So you can say, okay, we weren't doing lichatchila. But it's not just lichatchila. Mishnah Berurah says that if it's a suffix bread, so then it's vada yesh lachash. Okay, so you'll say that the Klal Yisrael paskin, like the second sheet, that there's an aval in the Mishnah Berurah, and that's a psak, even though I told you the Mishnah Berurah himself says to be chayshish, but he admits that the psak is like the gra and the chayodam, and Ramosha seems to paskin like that. That the psak is that you don't necessarily have to be chayshish for gimel dal beitzim. We see a lot of people aren't. So okay, so how much is the amount then? 12 beitzim. Now, but say the average slice of pizza is, I don't know, maybe something changed in the Scott and what pizza is. I don't know. The average slice of pizza is, we're saying 7 kazaysim. That means 4 beitzim berach. 2 slices, about 8. The average meal is 3 slices of pizza. The size, 12 beitzim. So, and be'emes, the taka makes a lot of sense. A person has 2 slices of pizza, he's not full. He has French fries, etc. He has 3 slices of pizza, he's full. But Manasseh, this was my Girsa D'Yankasa, and in the Girsa D'Yankasa, we heard 2. But I don't know, the feed today, it comes out like this, that if somebody wants to go with this shita, at least a woman might be different, like I explained. Because the average woman might be having 1.5, and a child might be having 1. I'm taking down men. The average man is going to be having 3 slices of pizza as a meal, then it'll make a mitzi. But if this, it'll come out that if a person has 2 slices of pizza and he's going only with the second shita, so then l'chayra, he's going to make a mezainis and an alamichya. So what's the problem? The problem is it would be my Girsa D'Yankasa. No, but it's everybody here's Girsa D'Yankasa, and I'm not even gonna say it. Who are they misyachis this shmua to Rabbi Yisai? I'll wait till somebody chats in. Who are they misyachis this great shmua to Rabbi Yisai? 1 slice mezainis, 2 slices amaitzi. Everybody here knows. Who is this said b'shem? No one knows? Rav Moshe. Thank you very much. One by one, they're all pouring in the Rav Moshe. The Goin Rav Moshe is known to have said 1 slice mezainis and 1 slice amaitzi. There are 2 slices amaitzi. So this everybody says what bothers me. It doesn't stem, right? So Rebelsky, Zeichat Tzadik Levrach in the Shulchan Levi, page 28, he brings down Rav Moshe said 1 slice mezainis, 3 slices amaitzi. So you're going to say, okay, the shmua never happened. The shmua never happened. So I don't know, but yeah, how can you say that? It's a shmua that everyone knows. So last week, Rav Reuven, Zolzain Gesund, was in Eretz Yisrael. I had a Talmud that was there. I said, once he's there, I'm giving shir next week on this. Ask him, did Rav Moshe say 2 slices is a mitzi? So he said, no. Moshe never said 2 slices is a mitzi. He said, Echmein, Rav Moshe said 3 slices is a mitzi. So what should I tell you, everybody say? The fee what we're saying today, it stems. They're going with the second shita. And therefore, on 3 slices, you would make a mitzi. But again, it comes out a very interesting thing. If someone's going to ask us, what should he do when he goes to the pizza store? We're going to tell him, well, your wife, she vadai has to make a mitzi on 2 slices, no shaila, because that is her own min. And the child, for sure, on 1 slice already, he gets full. So he has to make a mitzi. And you, Lechatchila, not only lechatchila, vada yishlach on even one slice, you shouldn't be saimech on this. If you want to be saimech, so then you can be saimech, and then you would only wash and bench once you have 3 slices of pizza, or 2 slices and pretzel and tons of what do they call it, French fries and
Is there
whatever.
a possible claim that the fact that you're ordering one slice and taking it out to your car to eat, you're not sitting down? Does that enter into the equation at all?
It could enter, but that's chidushim. That's not something that that a person he has to be right to say such chidush. I'm not right to say such a chiddush. Obviously, I'm not right for anything, but I'm saying that's already a chiddush. It's no one said here it's totally in the tzura. At least on the page, it could be. We'll see him. It's a shambly neder. Are those that say such idea?
So the author said so because they're talking about sudas HaRav. You don't eat that on the run, unless today you do eat that in the run. I don't
So
know.
the emphasis. Let me take a step back a second. There's a shaila. Excuse me. There's a shaila that I had that I want to know what the Olam would have thought. I'll tell you when I looked around what I found. But it's interesting. In those days, they used to have 2 meals. We obviously today have 3 meals. Most people have 3 meals. Some people have 30 meals, but most people are having 3 meals. So I would say I would break it down like this. It depends where you are, right? But dinner generally is the main meal, and lunch is like a 75% meal, and breakfast is like a 50% meal by a lot of people. Now, in the yeshivas in Eretz Yisrael, it's not like that. Breakfast is one size, maybe a smaller size meal, let's say, and lunch is the main meal of the day. And then the dinner is smaller. But the point being that there's usually, by most countries in the world today, 1 meal that's major, 1 meal which is almost major, and breakfast. Am I right in the assumption this is Baruch, what's going on? So my shaila is how do you don breakfast? Kloimar, how do you don the shir now? Excuse me. Do I say now that when we're trying to figure out the kfiyas suda, when we're trying to figure out now the kfiyas suda, we're trying to figure out how much crackers, cake, this, that, whatever. So I said it's 12 beitzim. But when I said 12 beitzim, I told you I was basing it on the major meal of the day. But the breakfast is not. Breakfast is a small meal. Most people get away with a Danish for breakfast. So how do you figure out what meal we're talking about? I said when we're talking with the shita, that we go based on the normal meal. In their day, it was very simple. There was only 2 meals. So both of them were major. So they were both 12 beitzim, let's say. But Masha'in came today. Do I look at the breakfast? Do I look at dinner? If you would have asked me, I would have thought, well, it depends. If you're having breakfast, that's what I would have thought. If you're having breakfast, it'll be 8 beitzim. If you're having dinner, so then it'll be 12 beitzim. That amount. That's what I would have thought. The Maisa, you look around, and it seems that the Heintige Poiskim that discuss this, they all seem to say not like me. They all learn that no, Ba'amis, the word is that breakfast by you is just considered a snack. That's the lumdus. It's not and we want to know what's a suda. And when we're dining, at what point did it get the chshivas of turning this pasa bekisnin into a moitzi? Was only at the point of where it's nechshav a suda, which suda, obviously it means the suda, not a snack. And they consider breakfast to be a snack. That's what I did find in the Paiskin that seemed to discuss this. Now this everybody say, that's the first part. That's the first part. Now, the next part over here, everybody say, next part in this beautiful picture, this beautiful sugya, the next part is the Mogen Avraham. Excuse me. Next part is the Mogen Avraham. So a moment. Try to find the Mogen Avraham myself.
Cutting your gimel.
Yeah. I'm just finding my notes.
Page 176. Page 176.
Yeah. So here, just one moment. I'm sorry to get my bearings over here. There. So the Mogen Avraham brings down that that's all if you're having the mezainis by itself. But let's say you're having the mezainis and you're being malafes the pas, you're being malafes the other foods. You're using the crackers, pretzels as a bread supplement, and you're being malafes with the other foods. Lifton mitzdarf l'shir suda. Come to Mogen Avraham, and he says, if other things are malafes it, the other things are joining together with it. Excuse me. Other things are joining together, then that's going to be considered enough for a shir. In other words, according to the Mogen Avraham, whatever you consider to be an amount of a bread supplement, plus altogether reaching out to 12 beitzim. Let's say we'll go with that shita. And it sounds like from the Paiskin that the Magen Avraham is really going with, when he has this chumrah, he's going with the 12 beitzim chumrah. And it could be that there's a Maccabee Mekel anyways, because there are two shitas, and this is an extension of chumrah of the Magen Avraham. But what comes out is basically, let's see, if I have a bunch of pretzels and crackers and tuna and everything and whatever, and I have the amount of crackers, which is an amount that I would consider to be a bimkoim bread, a substitute bread. So then that itself gives a chshivah to this mezainis product and turns it into a maitzi. This is the Magen Avraham. Ramesha in Gimel Amid Beis, Moshe brings this Magen Avraham, and he says, even though the Aruch HaShulchan argues on this Magen Avraham and says there's no such thing, you have to look at just the mezainis product. The Aruch HaShulchan has big Kallus over here by side. If you ever see somebody eating tons and tons of cake and pretzels and whatever, he's an Aruch HaShulchan Degiyit. He doesn't hold of the Magen Avraham. He doesn't hold of the 12 beitzim. He holds the chafal beitzim, and he can eat and eat and eat and eat. And you can't say anything to him. He holds like the Aruch HaShulchan. He's a bigger Talmid Chacham than us. He knows the Aruch HaShulchan. But Kapanim, that's not the pashtus of the Mishabura, certainly not. And the Ramesha, that's not the pashtus halacha. The pashtus halacha is, like it says in Mishabura, that we do consider the bread to be a mezainis supplement. It's true. The Kaf Chaim and Sivkat Mem Zayin says that the minig of Svardim is to not be chayshish for this Magen Avraham. But again, the Mishabura is, and Ramesha is. Now, how much is this? How much is the amount? So, Ramesha has a tshuva. Over there, he's talking about, interesting shaila. He's talking about somebody who's at a chasana, and he doesn't want to get stuck at the chasana. Derech Agav. Doesn't Ramesha have an eitzah to not get stuck at the chasana? Ramesha has an eitzah, just have das, having zin, that I'm not being mitzaref to the Zeman, to the Tzibur, and then you're not chayiv in Zeman. And as Ramesha is bothered, a person has a problem. He doesn't want to get stuck at the chasana. He has to learn the next morning. He has to daven the next morning. He has to go to work. So he's going to be at the chasana all night long, and they're taking pictures for the last 37 hours. So Ramesha says, okay, just have das that you can wash, and have das that you're not a part of the oilam. And then Ramesha says you're allowed to bench, and you don't have a chiv zimun. So over here, Ramesha is talking about the same person, and he talks about a guy that he just doesn't wash at the chasana because he doesn't want to be chayiv in the zimun. So he just has cake and food. Derech Agav, Ramesha has an eitzah. What's the problem? So can even in that tshuva, you see Ramesha only said you should only be saimich on it if it's a big tzairich and whatnot. So can this person didn't want to be saimich on this Ramesha. Ramesha himself didn't want to be saimich on it. So he says, I have a different eitzah. I'll be frummer. I'll just have cake and a whole meal. Says Ramesha, with this Magen Avraham, now you got a major problem. With this Magen Avraham, says Ramesha, how much is the amount? So Ramesha says words here. He says it's not that much. and the emes is that Ramesha, I'll explain Ramesha, it's totally, he sort of over here can't say, but l'daite. You have people today, everybody say, it's totally Ramesha says in every Medina, and what's the norm and how much bread people have during a meal. Now, I'll ask them over here, how much bread is the average amount of bread on Shabbos with challah? You have one big piece of challah, maybe 2 pieces of challah. That's maybe 3 slices of bread, maybe 4 slices of bread, the amount. So once you're having that amount of Pasuk Bekisnin, says Ramesha, you're getting into a major shaila. So let's say you're going to the chatz and says Ramesha, and you're having, Ramesha says kikes. That's, I think, cakes, right? Kuf Yud Kuf Samech. You're having these cakes, these mini cakes. I don't know what chassan Ramesha is at. Maybe he meant the smorgasbord, but later, Ramesha says at the chassan you're having cake and you're having the meal. Says Ramesha, you're getting involved in a very serious shaila over here. Here, you're going to eat 12 beitzim because you're having the chicken and the potatoes and everything, and you're going to have already 2 or 3 pieces of cake. And Ramesha says it's very difficult to figure out the exact amount. So Ramesha says you better stay away from this shaila, because once you have 3-4 pieces of cake, that's barech the size of the amount of bread substitute. Now, says Ramesha, it's going to be mitzaref together, and you have to wash and bench, and you gain nothing. You should have taken my other eitzah. Ramesha will tell you the eitzah of just not having in zin, just having in zin. Excuse me, that I don't want to be mitzaref to the people over here for the zimun. So this Ramesha is, I'm afraid to say, but it's earth shattering. This Ramesha. He says it's a very small amount. It's a very small amount. Now, and again, the Aruch HaShulchan argues on the Magen Avraham, but the Ramesha says it's not mistaber. Ramosha says
One
that.
piece of cake, one piece of cake. The Rav saying one piece of cake.
I don't know about one, because I don't think most people don't have one piece of bread when they have a meal with bread. But definitely 2 or 3 pieces of cake. He's going to have, let's say, 4 rogalach, and then the whole ganze meal. Very serious shaila. 4 rogalach and a ganze meal, that's 12 beitzim. According to the Magen Avraham, the way the Ramosha learns the Magen Avraham, that is, he has to wash and bench. That's Ramosha. That's how he learns. Now, I must tell you that there is a very big chiddush in this Ramosha. A very big chiddush. The chiddush in Ramosha is that the conventional pshat of malafis is a pass is that you eat, it helps the pass go down. You know, in the Haim, they would take a bissel broit and they would dip it into this, into the chicken, into this. They would eat everything with bread because they didn't have that much food. But they would eat everything together with bread. Now, according to that, it comes out that, I'm sorry, then what you could have said is, Ula, you could have said a little bit, not like Ramosha. Ramosha's talking about cake. Cake is not something you eat together with the chicken, with the potatoes, with the food. Maybe the Magen Avraham was only going on something that's milafis to pass, not as something that we look at as 2 separate meals, the cake and the chicken and the. Ramesh is saying a chiddush. Ramesh is saying that like we've been saying till now, the cake is the bread substitute, and that's the amount of cake which has a chashivas, and that's it. You could have learned that like that. You could have learned that we have to look, is it coming to be malafis to pass? Now, that'll be true by crackers, maybe egg matzah, maybe pretzels, maybe this, that, but it won't be true by cake. Cake you don't eat together. Who says this svar? I found the svar in the Shmir Shabbos Kehilchos and Perak Nandal, the Oracle Flamet Beis. He says, even the Mishnah Berurah just means, he says Efsher over there. But in the Mishnah Berurah of Rav Nebenzahl, in the Yitzchak Yikari, on our sif, he brings that Rav Shlomo Zalman was Vadai about this, that the only time we mitzarif together the mezainis with the fish, the meat, etc., is when it's something you eat together with it, like pretzels, crackers, something like that. But not something that you eat totally benifred. Even there, the Mishnah. Now, I see they bring a derech chayim in the Chometz Tika Haggadah. He brings this in the Haggadah. At the end of the Haggadah, the derech chayim, the Nesivis, and the Ma'aseh Nisim it's also brought in Reshit Tes Sif Gimel, the Sugya Bar Minim Zaynis, but in the Ma'aseh Nisim in the back in the Kunshas Achron, he does seem to say, like Rav Shlomo Zalman, it's Lashon, I'll read you. He says, Nir Ali, the HaRav Magen Avraham, that filu achal imoy bazav dagim v'dvarim acherim levloy atzaveh nir adainu davka she'achal imoy dvarim amalaftim apas. You're eating it together. In kasha, he brings a kasha, and he asks on this. He sounds like it has to be something that you eat with the pas. With the pas. The Nesivis is not like Rav Moshe. It sounds like the only time that we say this is when you eat it with the pas. I'm not 100% convinced.
What does with mean? It's on top of the pas, or you're eating it a kiddush?
I think it means, I don't know if it means mamish the same second, but it means, that's how, like you eat a piece of chicken, you have a cracker, like, I don't know if it has to be mamish together, even though the Sivas does sound like that. But I'm definitely not where Moshe. Definitely not cake, which is something you eat totally separate. Now, you certainly don't consider it to be one. Now, I'm not 100% convinced by the Nesivis, that the Nesivis is arguing Rav Moshe. It could just be that in those days, I thought a little bit like this. In those days, that was how they ate the bread of their meal. They ate the bread with the chicken. They ate the bread together with the meat, with the this. Everything was dipped together. The bread. The ganze Zeit, they ate bread. Malafis is a pas. Today, it's changed. We'll eat bread in the beginning of the meal, and then we won't eat bread again. And we'll have the chicken, we'll have this, and we won't even eat the bread again. So today, the substitute bread, it has to be when? In the beginning of the meal. So the way we have bread, Ramesh is saying, yeah, today we eat bread in the beginning of the meal. So if the cake is in the beginning of the meal, and you're having the cake as the bimkoim, but this is how we're malafis to pass today. It's a svara, I'm not convinced. I don't know if it's muchach. I would say Halacha LiMayseh is a big makom to be mekel, because don't forget, first of all, the Aruch HaShulchan argues on the Magen Avraham Stamazai. And the Kaf HaChaim, like we mentioned, said that not like the Magen Avraham. And there's a lot that argue bichlal on this Magen Avraham about the concept of a substitute and joining it together. So, you put that together, that some argue, and there's a suffix how to learn the Mishnah Berurah, the Magen Avraham in general, that perhaps there has to be something eaten together. So therefore, there is a makav d'mekel if you're having cake together with the chicken and this and that, to not be mitzaref it. But don't forget, that's only by cake. But mashenkin, something like crackers and pretzels and these things were joined together. Then echanami. Then taka. I mean, Shlomo Zalman has even a bigger chiddush. Shlomo Zalman's mashma that even cake that you're eating mamish at the same time, but that's not together with the chicken. Even if you would be eating it, it's not something that connects to the chicken. That's even a bigger chiddush. But okay, it definitely is a makim to l'chayra be makel. Okay, there's a makim be makel on that. This is Rabbi saying, I'll make a sikon. This is kind of the first part. We got through the first part, which is the chelik of what exactly is the shear. And what did we see today? Taka saw a beautiful sugya. The sugya of what is the shear that at that point, already it's no longer a mezainis in alamechia. We saw today that gimel dal beitzim is a very serious factor, and the Mishnah Berurah says, by the way, if it's a suffix basa בכיסנין like pizza, then he says vada you should be chayshish, which really changes a lot of society. Everybody say who wants to go with the sheet of the Mishnah Berurah. He does not have one slice of pizza and only make a mezainis. That's what comes out. And we saw not only that, his son also can't because he's a child, and his wife also can't because she has a min that gets filled up. Then we saw that the ikar psak of the Mishnah Berurah aval is the shear of a suda. What suda? Probably not breakfast, probably a main one. We saw that Aruch HaShulchan said 21 beitzim, but the Paiskim say that's a pella. Nobody eats like that. So the amount is probably 12 beitzim. We saw that lefi this. What's the shot in the shmua of Rav Moshe? He said 3 pizzas. It's not 2 pizzas. So we heard from Rav Reuven and we heard from Rav Belsky. He never said it. It's taka 3 pizzas. And it comes out that one that wants to have 2 slices of pizza and only go with the second shita, and he's a man, so then he can make a mezainis and an alamechia. But once he starts being with sarif, the other stuff, certainly French fries, and he has the amount now of 12 beitzim. So that l'char the Magen Avraham says, if you have the amount of a bread substitute, you would have to make a moitzi and a birchas hamazon. Rav Moshe says you have to be careful because it's a very little amount. How much is that? So Rav Moshe says, I don't know. It could be already gimel beitzim. It could be 3 slices of bread a person has at a meal. So then 3 pieces of cake is already going to have a problem. That we saw that Rav Moshe is a chiddush because he could have heard it's only something like pretzels and crackers, but not something like cake. Or Shlomo Zalman said that cake doesn't melafes together with the other. It's not considered melafes with the etapas. It's only something that you would eat together like pretzels or crackers. But enochanami, if he has 3 pieces of bread worth of pretzels and crackers, and he has a constant meal, that, according to the Mishnah Berurah, you have to wash and you have to bench. If you see somebody not, I guess he holds like the Aruch HaShulchan. And I'll see you in Yerushalayim, next week, Bezos Hashem.
Okay.